Well, hey there guys, Conceptual Concept 6.9 here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. QB roll footage for how gorgeous it is here. But anyone who's been watching the channel for a long time knows I've tested quite a few different pieces of AK chassis systems and different optic mounts, etc. And there are only a few that I can solidly recommend. Now, I'll go ahead and post a card up here for my chassis systems optic mounting solution. Like, it's hit and miss with AKs, but general gist is there are only two full chassis systems I can recommend at the moment. So the first one is the cheap and venerable TDI X47. So this guy is a really solid rail system. However, I feel like it's really in the block 1 stage, like in modernization of the M4. It's right in that block 1 stage. Can you make it work? Absolutely. Is it good, rigid, solid? Absolutely. But for those of us looking for something a little more, the only other one I can recommend is Zenitco. I've been running this extensively. I've got about between 8,000 and 9,000 rounds. I'm definitely edging closer to 9,000 rounds if I haven't passed it with this Zenitco Sport 1 kit with the B33 dust cover, and it has proved to be incredibly rugged, reliable, and dependable. So in terms of full modernization right now, if you're looking for something to match or get close to a free float AR for your AK system, Zenitco is all I can recommend. Now, again, TDI X47, excellent chassis, never gonna knock you for running that. But if you're choosing to run something with a full-length handguard, being able to mount lasers, illuminators, all the stuff for night vision, all that good stuff, this might be a better option. But sanctions, thanks Biden, but sanctions hit and we can no longer get those, and I think it's cost prohibitive and not worth investing in. One thing a lot of people don't realize is buying Zenitco handguards used can actually be a pretty big detriment, because these are hammer fit, so press fit into the receiver to give it that rigidity. And if your receiver is slightly wider, it allows for more space, suddenly you're not going to have a solid rigid system. So don't buy used Zenitco, buy new if you can find it. So personally, I can't recommend this, especially if you're trying to weigh out the cost versus benefit. I think it is a really excellent system. Again, I've been running it for a long time. I love it. But at the rates they're going, where just the chassis system alone costs you close to 2,000 bucks, if not more, I can't recommend going with something like that. So this is where the Barwarus B33 comes in. After my Sure Shot failure, which was pretty abysmal, and I was rooting for it. I was really excited for Sure Shot to be a good system. Got 1,200 rounds in, and suddenly I lost 0 by a significant margin. It was 7 MOA down and 8 to 9 MOA to the left. I might have reversed those numbers, but still a significant shift in impact. I did a poll, and I'll go ahead and put a screenshot of the poll, but as of this morning, the Barwarus was winning, and as of when I was ordering it, it was winning by a significantly larger margin. Now, I ordered this Sunday night and it was here on Friday. It was shipped out by Tuesday morning. It was packaged by Monday, and I had a USPS code. So really lightning fast shipping. I can't argue with that. But is Barwarus just as good as the Zenitco? Only time will tell. I'm not going to do a full review until I am at 2,000 rounds, but let's give initial impressions, because I do have some initial impressions here, and I want to address some comments that were made when I mentioned getting this system. So first thing I want to talk about is the install. The install on this KP104 was smooth as silk on everything from here back until I reached the rear dust cover, or the recoil spring, the pin that goes back there. Now, I did have to shave off a little bit of the little wings that go into the back trunnion so it could slide all the way back. So right here, we were unable to get this in that little channel to push back. Now the other thing I had to do was, it was offset a little bit and it was not getting a good lockup. So I took out my Dremel tool, I played Garage Gunsmith, and I dremeled off just a little bit of this bottom tab here to get a solid lockup with the Barwarus system. But this is pretty normal even for the Zenitco. So the installation was very simple. I got it done in, I want to say, less than a half hour, maybe 25 minutes. And I was really happy with it. It's very Zenitco-like. Every part of the installation was smooth. Actually, I've installed quite a few Zenitco handguards, and this was the second smoothest install on the handguard I've ever had. And let's move on to some of the comments I've gotten. So some people have said that the handguard was out of spec and it did not install properly. Zenitco, I don't know if many people have installed, I'm sure there are quite a few people who have installed as much Zenitco as I have, but I've installed about 10 total handguards of Zenitco, and a lot of it depends on your rifle now, or pistol. Now, this guy here required quite a bit of hammering. So I was erga-derging this guy super hard. I was hammering against this. So I had like rubber pliers. I was pressing on this and I was wailing on this guy for a solid 10 minutes to get this handguard to fit. Now I did, but I had to erga-derga this guy in. And Zenitco says you have to hammer it in, and depending on the specs of your receiver and trunnion, might take more force, might take less. So that's pretty normal. The other thing was, people mentioned the arms of the dust cover are kind of out of spec. And again, AKs are made in a lot of countries. There's a lot of variances. This is a Bulgarian AK, and the rear sight block actually is bulged, and I'll see if I can get a photo of it, but it's bulged down below here. And so I actually had to file off the insides of the arms to get it to fit properly. But once I did, it fit. So this is AKs, these aren't ARs. So Zenitco installs can be complicated as well. So I understand a lot of people did have their complications with the Barwarus, but this is a direct clone off the blueprints. This is a KUSA KP104 off the blueprints of a AK104 from Russia. So it was one of the smoothest installs I've ever had compared to the Russian stuff. So no issues there. Now let's get into the fit and finish. So I will tell you that there are some machine marks. I would say the machining is just slightly better than my Zenitco, but we'll see how it wears with time. It might be about on par with my Zenitco because the Russians aren't as crazy about no machine lines. One thing you'll find on my Zenitco, and I'll try and see if I can get some B-roll footage here, and I'll try and show some of it, but it has quite a few machine lines through here. That's pretty normal. It's not abnormal to have that on Zenitco products, and so it doesn't really faze me. I'd say the Barwarus is pretty similar. Now the next thing people mentioned was the finish. The finish on these Barwarus is a Cerakote. And I'm gonna tell you, the Cerakote, at least if it is on par with US Cerakote, it is more durable than the anodization and the painting that the Russians are doing on theirs. So the black Russian stuff actually holds up pretty good, but it still gets dinged up. Again, this guy has 9,000 rounds through it, roughly. You got finish wear here and along here. The black holds up pretty well, but let's flip over and show you here. You'll see there's a lot of shining metal. Now this isn't from banging around, this isn't from scratching, this is just from holding the gun, and it's kind of stayed this way for a long time. So the finish on this has worn off. And then I got the the equivalent of FDE. So this was, and I'll insert a stock photo, but this was more of a sand color than FDE, maybe a khaki color, but definitely I don't feel like the finish is any worse. Arguably, it might be better. And I say this as my Zenitco is my pride and joy. I've run it through the ground. I love the system. It holds up really, really well. So I'm just doing direct eye-to-eye comparison. If this Cerakote is as durable as US Cerakote, it's probably better than what they're putting on the Zenitco stuff. And let's address the last issue. The last issue was the aluminum. So a lot of people are saying that the aluminum is softer than Zenitco, and I'm gonna agree with you on the handguard. So let's go over the aluminum. I'll put some screenshots from the Barwarus site, the Zenitco site, and then I'm gonna compare it to US handguards. In fact, one of the most robust handguards that we know of. So the Barwarus Alpha handguard is using 6082 T6 aluminum. So for reference, it's a little softer than 7075 for sure, and I'll let you metal nerds get really into it. I would love to hear in the comments. So compare that to the Zenitco B30M handguard, which is a D16T. From everything I can tell, it is basically the Russian equivalent to 7075. So definitely a little more rigid than the Barwarus. But let's compare it to one of the most robust AR-15 handguards, which is the Daniel Defense RIS-2 rail. The RIS-2 rail is made out of 6061 T6 aluminum, which from everything I read is significantly softer than 6082. 6082 is considered like the top of the 6000 series aluminum. Again, metal nerds get into it, but 6061 AI overview, I'll go ahead and clip it in here, is softer than the Barwarus handguard. So Daniel Defense RIS-2 is softer than Barwarus. Take that balance for what you will, right? So I think that the handguard, and we'll see with testing, will hold up over time. Now the next thing is the T33, the dust cover system. They did up the ante on the dust cover. This is 7075 aluminum. For reference, D16T is basically the Russian version of 7075 as far as I can tell. Again, metal nerds get into it. So the dust covers are equivalent metal, again, as far as I can tell. So I'm not going to fault the dust cover at all. Now, will build quality, will these things actually hold up and present value there? We'll see. I'm going to put 2,000 rounds through before I can say definitively whether it is a solid system or not. And I'm going to run the same optic through the whole thing. I'm not sure I'm going to run this because I might run it with night vision, and the UH1 absolutely sucks butt for night vision. But I just wanted to address that. 7075 is also what your AR-15 uppers, the good ones, are built out of. So I think the dust cover is made out of good, solid material. The handguard is made out of better material than Daniel Defense handguards, but maybe a little worse material than the Zenitco. So there's that. Now let's get into the hardware. I think the hardware of the Barwarus, as far as I can tell, is superior. And the reason I say that is because they are using Torx bits and Torx screws to mount all this. And for reference, Zenitco, because they're Russian, they are using flatheads like this. And so flathead screws are not as good as Torx screws, especially to get that torque down. But general gist is first impressions, and I say this as someone who loves my Zenitco, and I have preached Zenitco for a long time. First impressions are that the materials are on the dust cover are just as good, maybe better because it's US quality. The handguard is a little softer than Zenitco, but it is harder than Daniel Defense, so take that for what you will. And I'm excited to run it because it is almost identical, and from what I hear, you can swap the dust cover between Zenitco and Barwarus back and forth. So I'm really excited to try this. I really hope this is solid. Another thing I want to bring up is this entire system here cost me $200 less than this guy. So Barwarus was $200 less than my Zenitco, and that was pre-sanctioned, pre-panic. So it's a little cheaper. I think the materials are good, but only time will tell. I'm not going to give a full review. I'm not going to give it a stamp of approval until I actually put rounds through it. So stay tuned, guys. We'll do some shooting. I'll have this periodically. It might be a while before I do a full review on it, because everything on this channel is funded through my wallet. And so shooting guns is expensive. 2,000 rounds is expensive. I am still working on my CZ Bren 1,000 round review, and this will be next. So stay tuned, guys. I'll talk to you next time, okay?